Leath Summit is your destination for big city vibes and small town charm.
Head to the downtown Leath Summit Farmers Market, where local meets fresh. Then grab a cup of coffee and discover a variety of shops and boutiques just around the corner. Continue the fun in downtown Leath Summit at a retro arcade bar. Discover your new beer at one of our 6 locally owned breweries. Cool off with some handcrafted cocktails at happy hour. End the night with live music and good company. Lee's Summit, Missouri.
Hello, Lee's Summit. I'm Laura, and this is your flash briefing for the week of April 14th. City Council will meet for regular session Tuesday night, 6 in Council Chambers in City Hall. Meetings are open to the public or watch live on the city's YouTube channel. If you can't watch, catch the recorded meeting on demand on the YouTube channel or by subscribing to the Council Debrief newsletter, which breaks down 3 to 4 key agenda items. Subscribe at cityofls.net. Volunteer for Stream Team and help protect our local streamside habitats by removing litter and debris from streams within the city's parks. This event will take place on April 19th from 10 a.m. to noon at Deer Valley Park. Trash bags and gloves are provided. Student and Scout community service hours are available. Volunteers must register and sign a waiver before the event. Learn more on the city's website. And celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Lee's Summit Fire Department at a fun-filled open house on April 19th from 9 a.m. to noon at Fire Station Number 3 located at 2023 Northwest Shamrock Avenue. Bring the whole family to tour the fire station and walk through an inflatable house to learn about fire safety. Don't miss this opportunity to honor their legacy and join the celebration. And also this weekend, join the Easter Bunny for a hopping parade on Saturday, April 19th from 10 to 11:30 a.m. downtown Lee Summit. Children and families can line up outside City Hall on 3rd Street at 9:45 a.m. to hop down to Howard Station Park and get a picture with the Easter Bunny. Find more information at downtownls.org. Thanks for listening and have a great week.
Officers en route, 914, armed robbery.
Welcome to the Leath Summit Sign Department. We are going to walk you through our process from start to finish. We make signs as needed here. It's not like we just go out into the field and place the speed limit sign here, no parking here. Our traffic engineers, they go through and they'll do field studies. They'll send us down an engineering work order for us to go out, place new signs or remove signs as needed. Coming from the material, our blanks come in and they're just aluminum blanks. We can put our white, our red, our fluorescent yellow, green, whatever. And basically what it looks like is just that there. Throw it up into the roller. And once we got it covered, take it to our work table here, and Tim will cut the corners, cut all the access off to where it's lined up right. As far as the plotter and the software that we use, there's a street name sign there, and he's gonna go ahead and print that out on the plotter so you can see the plotter and how it operates and runs. There's standards for the height, even just on letters on the sign blank. Basically what we have on the computer there is it's pretty much set up to those. And it goes through, it's got a very small but sharp needle that goes through and cuts everything out letter by letter. Once that's done cutting, Our next stage would be bringing it over here. Currently picking out the sign letters right now. We call it weeding or picking or however you want to call it. Next, putting it on the transfer tape. Then after it's taped, we bring it over to the roller. That's where we apply it to the actual sign blank. And we'll roll it through one time just to get the air bubbles out. And the last stage is basically just taking the transfer tape off the front of it. And there's a finished product of the street name sign. We'll take you out to the field and show you our process that we go through. We're going to go out and follow our sign guys and get something installed for you. This is where we check our underground utilities. Tim, you got AT&T?
AT&T's back here.
Evergy, Google, so we should be good to go. We normally put all of our stuff together out in the field. Then once the base is installed, we'll go ahead and put the post in there. We've come up to perfect. And that's how we do it. Simple. Quick.
Smith Hat Company is coming to downtown Lee's Summit. Purchase a variety of hats, including cowboy or cowgirl hats, or unleash your creativity and design a one-of-a-kind custom hat, choosing from premium materials, unique embellishments, and expert craftsmanship. Smith Hat Company is hanging its hat here in spring 2025. Summit Play Village is coming to South Lee Summit near Raintree. The indoor children's playground will be for children 8 and under to promote creativity, explore family-friendly activities, and have fun. Summit Play Village is set to open in April 2025. Street food sensation turned fast casual hit Dave's Hot Chicken is bringing the heat to Lee Summit. Specializing in Nashville-style hot chicken and serving tenders and sliders, Dave's Hot Chicken will be arriving to Summit Woods in summer 2025. Lee Summit is getting 3 ice cream shops across the city. Howdy Homemade Ice Cream will be scooping its way into the Chapel Ridge Shopping Center. Howdy Homemade creates a place where everyone belongs, a shop dedicated to creating jobs for people with disabilities. The amazing ice cream served by amazing people will be coming in summer 2025. Brewster's Ice Cream will serve Summit Woods Crossing with over 24 fresh, rotating flavors made daily. The shop offers 150 homemade ice cream flavors, including sherbets and sorbets, as well as ice cream cakes and pies. Brewster's Ice Cream is coming in summer 2025. Summit Woods Crossing is also getting a Cold Stone Creamery. The ice cream parlor serves fresh, made-to-order customizable ice cream mixed on a frozen granite stone. Cold Stone Creamery is coming in summer 2025.
When I was about 9 years old, my mother promised me that she would buy me a little black poodle for my birthday. The poodle was here in Lee Summit. We lived in Independence. I had never been to Lee Summit before. And the funniest thing when I got here, I just thought to myself, I want to live in Lee Summit someday. So in 1975, we moved here and we bought a little house in Briarcroft for $28,000. We started having children after that. We wanted to become part of this community.
Call regular session number 61 to order. Roll call.
Mayor Rhodes, he kept seeing me show up at the council meetings and he said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I want to know more about what's going on with the city." I was asked to be on the tax review board.
To order the Lee Summit Planning Commission.
Then I applied to be on Planning Commission and I spent 4 years there. But I said, if I dip my toe in the water with planning and I love it, I'm going to try for council.
Repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Cindy Rader,
Do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear
2024.
on the 16th day of April 2024. Thank you, Mayor. So then going along with what Councilmember Carlisle said, we just get back into the room and we hammer it out. And get. You know, we sit on the dais, right? And that's kind of one of the most intimidating things that you do is like being out there in front of people and being worried about, you know, saying the right thing or not saying the right thing. I want to make the right decision. I want to say things that will be impactful, that will be influential, that will help our city more. Most people know this on the dais. I am very impassioned about housing. It's partly because I've done real estate for 30 years, but it's not because I want to sell more houses. It's because we have a need, a tremendous need here in Leath Summit and really all over the country. There are a lot of people that want to come to Leath Summit. They want to live here, they want to buy homes here. I'm excited to get more attainable homes, start bringing young families, providing senior housing, workforce housing, all those things that we need if we're going to continue to grow and become bigger and better. We're really in a good place for the future, but we need to continue bringing people in to be our future leaders. The young people that will be coming to live here, stay here, have a stakehold in the community, building businesses here. I built a business here. There's other people that want to come here and live and start. It's just important for people to always be involved in the city. It makes us a better city.
I'd like to call to order the Public Works Committee meeting Monday, April 14th, 2025. May I get a roll call, please?
Chair Pryor.
Here.
Vice Chair Carlisle. Councilmember Rader.
Present.
Councilmember Funk.
Present.
May I get an approval of the agenda, please?
Chair, I ask for approval of the agenda.
I have a motion and a second. May I get a roll call, please?
Chair Pryor.
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlisle. Aye. Councilmember Rader.
Aye.
Councilmember Funk.
Aye.
Do you have any public comments? First item of business. Oh, can I get an approval of the Public Works Committee action letter, please?
Chair, I move to get an approval of the Public Works Committee action letter.
May I please get a roll call?
Chair Pryor.
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlisle. Aye. Councilmember Rader.
Aye.
Councilmember Funk.
Aye.
Thank you. First item of business, Bill number 25-074, an ordinance approving the agreements for the purchase of tree trimming and removal services from CTC Disaster Response Inc. and Shawnee Mission Tree Services Inc., DBA Arbor Masters, and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Michael Park, Director of Public Works, making a presentation for Mr. Binger. He may be here later this evening for some presentations, or I'll take those as well. This is for a tree trimming and removal services. Essentially, what we have used this on-call contract for in the past is when we need to get out in advance of construction or other types of issues where trees need to be trimmed or removed prior to construction. A lot of our jobs have a window of opportunity for us to meet those statutory requirements. Some of these are deemed habitats. of endangered species, and so we can't wait for a contractor to be under contract during its construction season.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions? May I get a motion for approval?
Chair, I move that we advance Bill number 25074, an ordinance approving the agreement for the purchase of tree trimming and removal services from CTC Disaster Response Inc. and Shawnee Mission Tree Service Inc., DBA Arbor Masters, and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement the same.
May I please have a roll call?
Chair Pryor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlisle. Aye. Councilmember Rader,
Aye.
Councilmember Funk.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is Bill number 25-075, an ordinance awarding the bid for project number 722 for the water main replacement fiscal year 24 project to Leath Sons Inc. in the amount of $4,491,843 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same. Mr. Thorne? Oh, no?
Nope, not tonight. Amanda Bagwell, Engineering Manager, Water Utilities, here for Mr. Thorne. This project is our annual replacement of small water mains. Each year we go through and we update our condition assessment for every water main in town. We then grab the ones that are in the worst condition and we build them up into our water replacement program. And we also try to pay attention to what area of town they're in. We obviously don't want a contractor running, to and from, so we try to pay attention to mobilization. What you see is the result of that work, and it's consisting of almost 15,000 linear feet of water main replacement. We bid the project in the middle of March. We had two bidders. Leath Sons was the lowest and most responsive bidder. We do have previous experience working with them and look forward to continuing another successful project with them. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have a comment, kind of question. So my office is downtown, and they have done, it's been kind of amazing. I guess they've been replacing water main. And downtown is probably one of the more troublesome areas because it's so old and there's so much. And anyway, it was rather amazing to watch these guys dig a hole bigger than a swimming pool in my front yard and bring in this giant pipe that 5 people could fit in. Anyway, but I appreciate it. It was a long, hard, they were there for weeks getting that done. So I can imagine just one little project there that it's quite an extensive undertaking. So that's all I had. Thanks, Chair.
Any more questions?
So where is this focused at this year?
So we have several projects on the map. Consist of, we've got a small area over on Colburn Road. That's really kind of one on the northeast side. The rest of them we tried to focus on the southwest side. Several near 50 Highway, but we're hitting Summit Woods, near John Knox Village, Cedar Creek Mall, Southwest Market Street. We've got a long stretch along Shear Road and Shear Lane. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If there are no more questions, may I please get a motion?
Chair, I make a motion to advance Bill number 25-075, an ordinance awarding the bid for project number 722 for the water main replacement FY24 project to Leath Sons in the amount of $4,491,843 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same. To City Council for approval.
Second. May I please get a roll call?
Chair Pryor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlisle. Aye. Councilmember Rader,
Aye.
Councilmember Funk.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item of business, Bill number 25-076, an ordinance awarding the bid for project number 887SS for the Surface Seal FY26 Program to Vance Brothers LLC in the amount of $1,175,208.21 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Good evening. Vince Schmager, project manager. Tonight, first consideration I have is the annual Surface Seal program. This is the street coating, about a 1/4, 3/8 inch, that we put down on streets, usually 7 to 10 years after an overlay. It helps give UV protection and any raveling or anything on top of the streets. We're trying to extend the life of the street. Surface has been lasting 9, 10 years before it wears off and you kind of get back down to your normal, like a asphalt would look. And there's crack sealing that goes on ahead of this, so this seal out the water, because cracks will still, pavement's pliable, and so if there's a crack and you only put this much on it, it's going to crack again. We put the crack seal to help seal that. This year, as normal, we had one responsive bidder. This is a very specialized product. A lot of times, there's a couple other vendors in town, but they just don't have the capacity to do the number of lane miles we're looking for. With that, any questions?
Get a motion for approval?
Chair, I recommend approval to City Council Bill number 25076, an ordinance awarding the bid for project number 887-SS for the Surface Seal FY26 Program to Vance Brothers LLC in the amount of $1,175,208.21 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Okay, please have a roll call.
Chair Pryor.
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlisle. Councilmember Rader.
Aye.
Councilmember Funk.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. On to Bill number 25-077, an ordinance awarding the bid for project number 887-OV for the Mill Overlay FY26 Program to Tandem Paving Company, Inc. in the amount of $4,059,105.78 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Second project I have for you is the annual Mill and Overlay program. This is the program where we actually take off the top 2 inches of street surface, which allows us to help with the cross slope, the rideability, and kind of get it back to very similar to original installation. And it also puts that fresh surface to help seal out from more potholes and just general degradation or cover repairs that have been made in the past. Tandem Paving was our low bid. This will be the first year using them for an overlay project. They have been our on-call for making various repairs, street repairs for us in Parks and Rec for several years. And they've done large cities pretty close to our size in the past. So with that, answer any questions.
Any questions?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, you answered my question because I noticed it was the lowest bid, and we don't always take the lowest bid, but you felt like they were a very good, reputable company and.
Right, they're very reputable. They've, like I said, I've worked with them on doing smaller projects. I know last year they had like the city of Blue Springs and had no problems there. Yeah, we try to vet them when they come in, but typically, unless we can have a specific reason not to hire somebody, we do go with the lowest contract bid.
You said they've come in and done some repairs for us
Yes.
as well in the past, and they've always been good quality and.
Always been good quality.
And we've never had to go back on any of that.
No,
Okay.
they, because they're smaller, maybe a 10 by 15 or a 10 by 110 foot asphalt repair, and they make the repairs and do it like it's supposed to be done.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, please get a motion.
Chair, I make a motion to advance to City Council for approval, Bill number 25-077, an ordinance awarding the bid for project number 887OV for the Mill and Overlay FY Program to Tandem Paving Company, Inc. in the amount of $4,059,105.78 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Thank you. May I please get a roll call?
Chair Pryor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlisle, Councilmember Rader,
Aye.
Councilmember Funk.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now, Bill number 25-078, an ordinance amending Chapter 29, Traffic and Motor Vehicles of the Code of Ordinances for the City of Lee's Summit, Missouri by revising Appendix B, Schedule of Stopping, Standing, and Parking Restrictions for certain streets and segments of streets located in the City of Lee's Summit, Missouri. Ms. Berry?
Good evening, Susan Berry, City Traffic Engineer. I am here this evening with a change to the schedule of stopping, standing, and parking restrictions. The first one is Northeast Victoria Drive, which is across the street from Meadow Lane Elementary School on Independence. It's the first block west of Independence. This was previously marked no parking, and when a staff went out to do a school safety study, they realized that parents were parking there. They were waiting there, not parking there, for their kids to cross the crosswalk and then come get in their kids. Our law enforcement was not able to enforce this because technically parking is when you get out of your vehicle. So we are changing it from no parking to no stopping, which basically means you cannot stop even to discard or pick up passengers. So this will allow law enforcement to enforce the rule that we had already intended to enforce. The reason we don't want cars stopped there is it makes it unsafe for the kids. They tend to dart in and out of cars and you can't see them, and obviously that's not a safe situation. The second location is Northwest Ashurst Drive from View High Drive to 150 feet west of Edgewood Drive, both sides. This is in response to the View High Sports Complex that came in front of council a month ago. The residents did have concern they'd be parking on that street, and we decided to mark that no parking to kind of head off any concerns that we might have when that comes in. Willing to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have one question, Chair. So do you, so you did the Ashurst to head off a problem, but if the View High project doesn't come to fruition, is that going to be a problem for, do you see a problem that you put that ordinance in effect before? I mean, I like getting ahead of things, but yeah.
There's no residences. We stopped it at the first property line west of the residences, so there's not really a negative impact. We can always come back through this body and remove it if necessary.
Just wondering. Thanks, Chair.
I'm sure a lot of people are going to be happy about that because I think that was the number one concern that they brought up that night.
Yeah. I mean, people are always concerned, but that seemed excessive, how many people were concerned about that.
Yeah. Thank you. May I please get a motion and a second?
Chair, I recommend to City Council for approval Bill number 25078, an ordinance amending Chapter 29, Traffic and Motor Vehicles of the Code of Ordinances for the City of Lee's Summit by revising Appendix B, Schedule of Stopping, Standing, and Parking Restrictions for certain streets and segments of streets located in the City of Lee's Summit, Missouri.
May I please get a roll call?
Chair Pryor,
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlisle, Councilmember Rader,
Aye.
Councilmember Funk.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now, Bill number 25-079, an ordinance approving modification number 1 to an agreement for professional engineering services for the Pryor Road Phase 2 improvements from Hook Road to M150 Highway, RFQ number 2023-058, between the City of Lee's Summit, Missouri and Affinis Corporation for an increase of $163,165 with an amended not-to-exceed amount of $1,264,143.95 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Scott Eason, Senior Staff Engineer. Originally, we asked Affinis to help us determine what type of pavement section to build. And through the use of a traffic study, we determined that we're going to use the original scope of pavement, and then the future will actually be the full 4-lane section. So this modification actually expands their scope to include an alignment study for the future and the PRI property that's getting ready to develop down there sometime in the future. And also, it includes a relocation of a water main down by 150 and Pryor, and then finishes the traffic study for the future condition. And if you have any questions.
Any questions? Can you please get a motion and a second?
Chair, I move to advance to City Council for approval, Bill number 25-079, an ordinance approving modification number 1 to an agreement for professional engineering services for the Pryor Road Phase 2 improvements from Hook Road to M150 Highway, RFQ number 2023-058, between the City of Lee's Summit, Missouri and Affinis Corporation for an increase of $163,165 with an amended not to exceed amount of $1,264,143.95 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
I have a motion and a second. May I please get a roll call?
Chair Pryor.
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlisle. Aye. Councilmember Rader.
Aye.
Councilmember Funk.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Now, Bill number 25-080, an ordinance approving the award of RFP number 2025-049 to purchase landscaping services and materials on an as-needed basis for a one-year term with up to 4 one-year renewals to Rosehill Gardens, contract number 2025-049-1, and to Dupree Landscaping LLC, contract number 2025-049-2, and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement, to execute the same for the city. Not Mr. Page.
No. Hi, Sharon Bloom, Central Building Services. Rosehill is the organization that's been doing our planters downtown and taking care of our trees for at least the past couple of years. That's as long as I've been here. Anyway, so this is a new contract just to keep using them and have them continue making our flower pots look beautiful and keeping our trees trimmed and healthy.
Thank you. Any questions?
So do we have a budget that it says as needed, but I just.
I wish I knew. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Stepping in for Brian.
I guess, yeah. What?
Councilmember Rader, so these are
yes.
also on-call contracts. We're actually 2 vendors that are in the scope of the contracts, and their budget authorization is approved by City Council in the city's budget.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So they're, sorry.
No, go. I'm good.
So Dupree and Rosehill are both on call. Either one of them could do the planters. Is that what this contract is?
We have traditionally used Rosehill for as long as I can recall, too. So they will both be given opportunity to provide scope and fee for the types of work that we would need them to do, including what has already been established downtown. But you've got the Green Street project that's coming online, so there's a lot more landscaping and other locations and facilities that have landscaping that we would use either one of these vendors to take care of within the limits of budget that have been authorized.
Would it be would they both come back and price out, say, just the downtown planters? We're ready to do the planters. They would both provide a scope and
They could, but those would be administratively then issued work orders.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? I think they do a great job. Thank you very much. May I please get a motion in a second?
Chair, I move to City Council for approval Bill number 25-080, an ordinance approving the award of RFP number 2025-049 to purchase landscape services and materials on an as-needed basis for a one-year term with up to 4-year, one-year renewals to Rosehill Gardens, contract number 25-049-1, and to Dupree Landscaping LLC, contract 2025-049-2, and authorizing the city manager to execute the same for the city.
Second.
May I please get a roll call?
Chair Pryor.
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlisle. Aye. Councilmember Rader.
Aye.
Councilmember Funk.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Now it's a resolution number 25-08, a resolution to adopt Phase 2 of the Airport Master Plan. Mr. Anderson?
Good afternoon, everybody. Mike Anderson, Deputy Director of Public Works Operations, to talk about Phase 2 of the Airport Master Plan update. So that seems kind of odd. We had a master plan update that we adopted in 2021. So you may be asking yourself, why are we having a Phase 2? A good reason, one of the biggest reasons for that, I think, was grant funding from the FAA. In order to utilize the maximum amount of grant funding we could, it was grab what we can now and grab some more later. So we split it up into two. But there were logical places to split that up. The primary, the master plan update really focused on the typical planning elements of the master plan. And the Phase 2 focused primarily on two very large scale, I guess, complex FAA requirements of a master plan. And that is the Airport Layout Plan, the ALP, and the Exhibit A property map. So essentially the request for the resolution is for the Airport Layout Plan. The airport layout plan shows what the airport is today and what we want it to be in the future. And the FAA, before they accept our ALP, want to make sure that the local officials and everybody's on board with what we're submitting. So they like to see a resolution of support when we submit the ALP. And I'm going to talk more specifically about what that is. Also, the Exhibit A property map, which is really just a summary of all the airport property, how it was purchased, when it was purchased, was it local funds, grant funds, abrogation easements, just kind of an inventory of our property. And then there were additional planning documents that were part of the Phase 2 of the master plan. And all but the wildlife hazard assessment plan are also very integral to the airport layout plan. And I'll talk about each one of those things independently as we go through here. I won't belabor anything too much. So the airport layout plan, again, this is one sheet of several. It really is the inventory of our airport facilities, both current and proposed. And so when you talk about inventory, we think about buildings and things like that, but this covers buildings, this covers the pavement, the taxiways, aprons, the airspace, the land, the runway protection zones, all these things, both tangible and intangible, that we own and control as part of the airport and the airport's airspace. The biggest reason for this is, one, we show the existing facilities, and then we show what we want in the future, where we see the airport going, how we see it developing. This is obviously very integral with our master plan. Where are we putting hangars? Where are we putting aprons? Where are we putting the air traffic control tower? Things like that. So in the future, when we have a hangar developer comes in and says, hey, I want to build a hangar here, we show them, based on our master plan, this is where you're going to go. We have to submit those plans to the FAA for an airspace study. First thing they're going to do is grab the airport layout plan. Are we proposing a project that's in alignment with our airport layout plan, that everyone's adopted, that you have adopted, that the FAA has? And it certainly expedites any airspace study if they show, we're putting a hangar right where we said a hangar would be. We already know everything's fine. So that's really the high-level overview of what the airport layout plan is. The Exhibit A property map, like I said, this is really, it's a collection of all the properties that have been purchased by the airport over the years. It's just a document when they were acquired, how they were acquired, was it local funds, was it grant funds. But like the ALP, this is also current and future property. So we will show all the current property that we have, but then we'll show potentially future property that we'll need to buy to protect future airspace. One of the things we look at in the future is dropping the approach minimums to runway 36. Well, if we do that, we're going to have to purchase some additional abrogation easements, and this map would show where those properties are and how those decisions or what would impact those decisions, what would impact what property we would have to buy. A lot of these things we've talked about over the last couple of years through committee and council. We're all well aware of the air traffic control tower and I think the desire to eventually have an air traffic control tower at the Leath Summit Regional Airport. You know, we were recently, accepted into the contract tower program, so we went ahead with the preliminary site study. Originally we were looking at Site 1. That's a Zoover's property, is probably the best site for an air traffic control tower. We looked at 2 additional sites, one, site number 2, there in the south, or in the northeast, and then site number 3 in the southeast. And as it turns out, site number 2 was actually the preferred location. It has good visibility. It'll be protected visibility in the future. It's the shortest tower, so it's the least expensive to build. So site number 2 is kind of the area that we're looking for the air traffic control tower. And if you look at one of the sheets on the airport layout plan there on the lower right, you'll see the little orange circle. That's the air traffic control tower. So that's in alignment with the site study, and now shows on our airport layout plan, where we intend on building that. And so there again, now we know that line of visibility we have to protect, and so as we develop on the airport, we know that protected space and we can plan that accordingly. Another one of the deliverables was the Runway 36, kind of a precision approach. Feasibility, looking at that right now, our runway minimums for Runway 36, and that is our primarily used runway during instrument conditions when it's wet, if the weather's bad and the pilots need to rely on their instruments to get in. Runway 36 is the primary runway. Right now we have minimums of 7/8 mile visibility, and I believe it's a 320-foot minimum descent altitude. To get that to precision approach, which would be a half-mile visibility and a 200-mile or a 200-foot descent altitude, what would be required? Well, there's really 2 options. One is a full-blown ILS, or instrument landing system, which is a ground-based navigation system. Or 2 would be installing a Mauser, which is a medium-intensity runway lighting system that also provides cues on the runway alignment. You've probably seen these driving down the road where you see the string of lights and the strobes kind of shooting towards the runway. That's what these are. Looking at the traffic, looking at the amount of time that this approach is in use, the recommendation is not a full-blown ILS. It does get your minimum descent altitudes down to 200 and your visibility to a half, but they're very costly to maintain, and it doesn't really seem like the benefit cost is truly there. So the recommendation would be, and what we show in the ALP, is just the lighting system. That gets us to our half-mile visibility, but keeps the minimum descent altitude at that 320. So that is the recommendation on the 3.6 approach. The obstacle action plan. This is the end of runway 3.6. That's where we have our biggest problems with respect to obstacles penetrating, or obstacles potentially penetrating protected airspace. When I talk about Part 77 airspace, that's an airspace that's kind of an alert airspace. If we have trees and buildings that are in the Part 77 space, that means, hey, wait a minute, you're getting close to some protected airspace, you need to look at these penetrations. So we do an obstacle action plan. Obviously, when you go out, you're purchasing property, you're removing trees. They can be very expensive, and they're kind of scattered about. So the obstacle action plan really gives us a little bit of a way to prioritize where we want to spend our money, where we need to spend our money, where we don't necessarily need to. This will actually show, again, both existing conditions and future conditions. What's the obstacle? What do the obstacles look like with the 7/8 mile visibility? What do the obstacles look like with the half-mile visibility? And what would it take to to go to that lower descent altitude or lower visibility. Not really associated with the airport layout plan, but was part of the Phase 2 Master Plan update, was the wildlife hazard assessment. And you may recall over the course of the last couple of years, we've had contracts with the USDA to do this study for us. And last year, and we had a contract for the rodenticide to take care of the rodents on the ground, which meant the birds of prey would go elsewhere and not conflict with the aircraft. And last year we had a contract kind of removing coyotes and geese primarily from the runway. So that's really it for the airport master plan update Phase 2. So are there any questions specific to that? And then since I have your attention after the questions, I'll have just a brief update on our airport renaming. So I'll pause here for questions on the resolution.
So Mike, did you say you were going to give us a little update on the land around the airport that you would eventually have to procure, or did I misunderstand that?
That is part of the Exhibit A property map. So that is in there. I wasn't going to get into the details. Primarily, future land acquisitions would be navigation easements south of I-470 along the runway 1836 alignment to clear some trees and things like that. That's really, if we need land, it's over there for some navigation easements.
And we've still got land that we're going to where we're building Hangar 2.
Oh yeah.
And then we talk about potential commercial space for.
Yes, part of along Hagen especially, part of the airport master plan is, shows that east side development that we're working on right now, and does include commercial space, non-aeronautical space for development. Could be restaurants, could be offices.
But
along
Hagen. But you have nothing, no interest at this time, or lots of interest?
Not at this time. I think once we get the road built and the east side infrastructure project complete, I think we'll start to see some interest there for sure.
Okay.
Right now, they just see a construction zone, but when they see that beautiful hangar, they're going to be knocking on our door. I just know it.
No, for sure. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Any additional questions?
Okay. Well, airport renaming and the rebranding update. We came to you guys back, I think it was in November, and we decided as a city council or as a city, that we wanted to rename the airport the Kansas City Lee's Summit Regional Airport. At that time, we didn't really know how long that would take. The FAA was saying anywhere from 6 months to 2 years to go through this process. Well, we signed that resolution on November 12th, and I'm happy to report that on January 23rd, really just a couple months later, we got our letter of no objection from the FAA. And typical FAA style, they don't really approve or deny anything, they just object So we had our letter of no objection with the notice that they would be, advising the airport data team to start updating the charts and whatnot. So sure enough, as we go into our aviation charts on the website, you'll start to see Kansas City Lee's Summit Regional Airport, Kansas City Lee's Summit Regional on the chart, Kansas City Lee's Summit Regional. So it's happened. We are now officially the Kansas City Lee's Summit Regional Airport. It's out there on the charts. By default, it's a bit of a soft opening. We get it approved, and then little by little, all the charts are updated. And we've had the transient aircraft coming in. They're calling in Kansas City Lee's Summit Regional traffic. So the next step of that, as we talked about, was once that got out there, was the marketing. And that's kind of the fun part. So Summit Aero, as you recall, is the name for the city-run FBO, fixed base operators, that provide all the world-class, excellent customer service at the airport. What you see here is kind of the end result of a lot of collaboration with the aviation community, with our fuel vendor, with creative services, looking through many different options, maybe a little bit of help from AI, I'm not saying. But through all that process, this is the logo that we came up with for Summit Aero. So it looks really good on shirts. We're excited to move into Hangar 2 where we can start, branding this in full force. Kansas City Leath Summit Regional Airport. We also wanted to have a logo for the airport. Again, this is, we went through a lot of different thoughts and concepts, looked at different airports. We really wanted something that was simple, kind of yet bold, and we came up with this design. Honestly, I can't even say how we ended up on this design, because we had a lot of stuff out there, but everyone kind of gravitated to this. It looks like different things to different people. Some people say it looks like a vertical fin. Other people say it looks like runways. Other people say it looks like a wing. But one consistency is what does anybody, and you guys have the PDF version so you know the answer to this, but the colors on the logo, does those colors mean anything to anybody?
I feel like Councilmember Funk and I would be cheating if we participated because we were in the
We won't
BOAC meeting.
participate. We won't participate in this.
If we think of what the airport brings to this community, it's all about economic development and economic impact, economic viability to the city, and really what are the three pillars in the city that all collaborate in that same effort. Of course, we have the Leath Summit Chamber, which is that kind of goldish color on the top. That's their branding color. We have the tourism division, which is that lighter blue, and the Economic Development Council, which is the darker blue. So we really thought it was important to, let's utilize those branded colors from the city for what we think are the collaborative organizations that really work well with the airport, that the airport serve. So that's how we came up with those colors. So that's really all we got. It's congratulations. We are the Kansas City Leath Summit Regional Airport, and I hope you like our logos. So,
good job.
Questions, comments?
Any questions or comments?
Do we have a big heart to put out there yet? A big blue?
Well, we can. You can see if you want to, commission some artists to put out there and draw an airplane on it.
So when do we get our T-shirts?
As soon as we have some printed, I'll talk to Joel. We'll talk about this at council tomorrow night. So I'll have all the council members email Joel their sizes, and we'll get that taken care of.
I love seeing the growth at the airport. You guys are doing a really good job. Mm-hmm.
It's been a fun time.
We need to forward the resolution on to council. So can I get a motion and a second to forward the resolution number 25-08 to council?
Chair, I move to advance resolution number 25-08, a resolution to adopt Phase 2 of the Airport Master Plan update to council for approval.
May I please get a roll call?
Chair Pryor.
Aye.
Vice Chair Carlisle. Aye. Councilmember Rader.
Aye.
Councilmember Funk.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And another presentation 2025-6789, Pavement Management Program.
Excitement of a new airport, annual maintenance on the pavements and curbings. So this is going to be a review of our four main projects on the pavement management with the curb, the overlay, the surface seal, and the crack seal. The pictures up here currently on the screen, that were last year's programs. The individuals, and then with the yellow label, you can see when you put them all together, it does look like we cover a lot of ground every year. So when we look at the pavement management program, we kind of try to look at it as a holistic, keep pavements in the good condition. We could always go after the worst pavements, but when you start doing that, you start chasing yourself because some that were okay before can fall into that that category. And the cost of reconstruction is 10 plus times, 15 times the cost. So $1 million of an overlay goes to about 100,000, maybe 150,000 worth of reconstruction. So your money falls apart. We also, and part of that is looking at, so we can overlay a street 10 to 15 times for every time we have to reconstruct it. So definitely maintenance is a better option than having to rebuild. Last year, the mill and overlay, we were just over 40 miles, and that's a $4.5 million contract. Surface seal was 43.8 miles, and that's another $1.4 million. Crack seal, 51 miles at $300,000, and curb, 17 miles, which 17 miles actual miles. When I say lane miles, I guess I should define that. We're talking about half a neighborhood, 1 mile long, 12 foot wide, 5,280 foot long. Here's just the idea of how many miles of street that we have. Asphalt, we actually have over 1,000 miles of asphalt street, and that's divided into over 5,000 sections. So trying to keep track of all the sections and how they relate to a neighborhood. And a section is simply one intersection to the next as you're going up a street. So you may have a 1,000-foot section, you may have a 100-foot section on some of the older where we have offset intersections. Funding, our primary funding source for this is the half-cent transportation sales tax. We also get a money from the 15-year CIP tax. And we have in the past had some money come in on special bond issues that rebuilt curb. And we got a bunch of arterial, some of our larger streets, curbs redone as part of that. Maintenance also supplemented with the operations division. They use $204,000 a year for curb replacement and another $236,000 for potholes. And they have another $1 million for working on larger repairs in the streets. And we talk about keeping good pavements good. If you just put a street in and you don't do anything with it, this is the red line. It just falls off, and over time it naturally decays into gravel again. But if we get in there every so often and do the overlays or the surface seals or the crack seals, we protect the street and we're able to extend the life of the streets. Just kind of similar to the previous one, it just kind of gives you, this chart gives you an idea of, when streets are in really good condition, there's not a lot you can do with them. As they start going down to good, to fair, to poor, you start doing overlays. The good and fair is more of a crack seal and the surface seal program. When you get down into poor conditions, then you're definitely getting into a mill and overlay. And you're trying to get, currently we do about 20 to 25 years on an overlay. So you're trying to use the surface seal and the crack seal to help get you to that. You will have spots that fall apart, potholes or rutting, that operations can come in and actually make repairs on these streets. So just kind of our pavement, just a cycle. We assess what's the condition of the pavement. What we put together, analyze, and put it together in our paver, in our GIS maps, see what our funding is going to be for the year. Then we create a plan, trying to stick with neighborhoods, the cost effectiveness of keeping, when you're doing an overlay, large areas. A street here, a street there, you're going to start paying a lot of transportation fees for the contractor. Our pavement inspections, we have this based on we have a 4-year rotating basis, and we go in and look for different types of cracking. Patches have taken place, whether it's failure patches. We also have a lot of utility patches. Shoving, is it rutting? Is the road rough? What's causing the road to be rough? And these are the type of items we look at when we're inspecting the streets. And then after the street inspection, we plug it all into our program called Paver. and it kicks us out numbers on what's the condition of the streets, from 0, which is a very bad street, to 100, which is a new or freshly overlaid street. Our current average is 73, which we feel is pretty exceptional. And this kind of gives you an idea. If you're below 24, it's an overlay. Consider rebuilding, but again, we've talked about the price, and for the many times as you can overlay it, sometimes maybe you're going to get 15 years out of a road instead of 20 years. We feel it's, to our benefit to go ahead and do the overlay on it. And we get up into the 75 to 89 range. It's more of a surface seal and crack seal program, which usually takes place about seven years after an overlay, sometimes 10 years. It's been, kind of the paving of history of paving in Leath Summit. 92 was the first year we actually came up with a design and construction manual. This is a set of standards used to dictate how we build streets, where we build the street, or not where, but how we build the streets. Before, it had been on an approval basis. This actually gave us, we're going to use this much asphalt. We're going to use this type of asphalt. This initial program, because of the building going on at the time, we had a lot of input on this from the development community, the people that build the roads, the developer crowd, just what can they do to keep it, we're not asking for the gold standard necessarily, but would still give us a solid street. Well, with what we came up with was a 20-year lifespan that actually only lasted about 10 years. So we came in through the years, have made small updates. 2006 was our first year we really got into a more stronger lines, and that's with our curb program. We went to a granite-based curb versus a limestone-based curb. You've probably seen around town some of the limestone curbing. It just totally disintegrated. We've got that down to about 270 miles to go now. So we're getting there. 2011, we actually came with a 35-year lifespan. Prior to this, our asphalt streets were actually put on a clay base, which clay dries out, it cracks. So in 2011, we were actually able to go to this, sorry, skip slides on you here. In this circled area, you can see where underneath the base, we actually have a geogrid and a rock base. So that pavement now, instead of the ground just simply breaking and reflecting up through the street, it actually has a place to slide and make movement without affecting the road near as much. And then last year, 2023, we updated to a higher grade of asphalt called Super Pave. It actually a little better materials in your aggregate, and it increased the amount of oil in there. So it's becoming smoother and tighter, more water resistant, and it should hold up better and be longer between crack seals and surface seals. Okay, this is the 3rd Street. This was the design for the 3rd Street between Murray and Pryor a couple years back. So we're working to improve initial construction, doing things like the better aggregate and oil. Mill and fill construction is just a different way to pave, to where we have stronger edges on the wider road, so the pavement actually gets fully rolled and compacted together. Keep taking advantage of the economics of scale, keeping projects together as far as residential streets. Arterial roads, they're kind of their own animal as they lead in, so we actually use those more standalone projects. And stack our curbs in our overlay programs. You'll notice that roads that we put curbs on are typically overlaid the following year. This year's an example. We have 15 areas on the overlay program. 10 of those are from curb replacement programs last year. Again, crack seal is installed 4 to 6 years, following overlay with the surface seal 7 to 9 years after that. And just a quick synopsis of the programs. I've got these in order that we typically do them if you started with the curb replacement and then went to the overlay, crack seal, and then surface seal. So curb replacement, we've seen curbs around Leath Summit like this, ones we're trying to replace. We've got most of them that look this bad off out of this program. You'll find them here or there, though. Replaces the damaged, deteriorating curb, and we do update the sidewalk ramps to current ADA standards so that we're in compliance with that whenever we're going through there. Last year's program was 104 ramps. So construction, you've got the top left, you have the big wheel that comes in and cuts in front of the curb so that when we lift the curb up, it's not going back in the yard. We're trying to lift it up as clean as we can without disrupting the yard. And then the top right picture is the curb machine putting the curb back down. Actually, this is an older picture. The new curb machines are using actually GPS. They don't even have the line for it to follow anymore. It's all through GPS followings. Some pretty good technology they're using out there. Mill and Overlay. This is the one everybody loves seeing coming to their neighborhood because it means we're getting new streets. Again, remove the top 2 inches of street, restore the road close to initial construction, and improve ride quality. Crack seal. I have people that call me about this. They don't like the looks of the crack seal, but it's kind of like your house when you use caulking in the shower or around the sinks. You're trying to keep the water from getting through the subgrade or in the house, trying to keep it out of the sheetrock. So it is definitely a very important and is actually one of the most economical processes we can use. The construction it's hot tar asphalt put in, and these guys with the squeegees just trying to keep them tight and not let it go all over the place. Surface seal. This is where I get the majority of my complaints over the year because it's just, again, that 1/4 inch, and whenever you put it down, you can see top left corner here, the guy, it's a pug mill type setup. It actually goes down moist. It's the reason we have to shut the street down, usually 2 to 4 hours so it can set up. That being said, the picture on the left is just somebody that went through the traffic control and pulled up in their driveway, and it will track. The one on the right, this is where I get a lot of calls, especially in the cul-de-sacs with people turning, making the turning movements and stopping and going out of their driveways. These are actually okay. This is right after, within like the first week, this material calms down, loses its shine. It looks more like an asphalt that's been driven on. These marks will still be there, but if you look at them, they're in the surface. They're not digging down through the material. And we just have to watch. We try to coordinate with the trash company so they can be down for a couple days. Doesn't always work, but we try. And this is just an example. I've picked the Princeton Heights subdivision just because it's a pretty confined area. If you know the area over here on the I guess it'd be the southeast corner of town. There's 308 homes. There's 4.3 lane miles and, 5.43 lane miles and 5 miles of curb. To do a new curb project and to overlay that, you're looking over the 2 years, based on last year's costs, about $1.5 million. So I know when we actually overlaid this in 2009, so 16 years ago, that was the only project we had in curb that year. So our budgets have increased and allow us to trying to get ahead of some of the problems we have. And surface seal would be about $175,000, and crack seal's $30,000. That's why we like getting in the crack seal. If we can preserve the road before it gets wet underneath, causing the potholes and failures, we're definitely money ahead. I believe that, yep, that's it. Any questions?
Thank you. Councilmember Rader?
Here. So Vince, I know you probably, well, you just tell me. How do you determine, I'm guessing that you prioritize where you're going by condition, but how do you know? Do you use the GIS mapping service to determine what the condition of it is, or do you guys actually drive around everywhere?
We look at it, let me back up here to a slide. See this slide right here, the map in the middle? That is our GIS conditions. This is in the, you can see on the right side, you got a scale there, 0 to 10, 26 to 40, 56 to 70. So the ones that are, the greener they are, the better they are. So when we really start looking at them when they're in the yellow, This map here's a couple years old because I know 2 years ago up there in Lakewood, there's a whole, the tree name streets have all been overlaid like 2 years ago. But we look at this, and then as we inspect streets, the colors change, and we can look for hot spots. And then we always do drive, like you're saying, drive and confirm what we're looking at to make sure everything's in the condition we're thinking it is on the maps.
That technology that you can
Isn't
do
it
it that
fun?
way. It's fun, yeah.
Yeah. The curbs are another story. That's a lot of walking. We know where they're at and the years built. We have kind of the same map, but it's still more of a walking and making sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I don't know who this question's for, and it's really not in here. But
I'll
down
have it next
on,
year.
Yeah, Ward Road past 150, where we went ahead and remade that road. That's it is in Cass County, but it's almost into like Peculiar or whatever that turns into right there. Raymore, right? And it's concrete.
County line, we concreted at the county line to 163rd Street.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
the
the
strip.
Raymore just did the extension from there out to 58.
Right. So how long ago did we concrete that? Do you remember?
Is that 7 years now? 5?
So on that, I remember when we were concreting that, he said we were going to look at that and see if that lasted longer than some of the other. Have any idea of that yet? Hey, sorry, I should have waited.
Okay, yeah, good evening. George Binger, city engineer. Concrete definitely has a longer lifespan and requires a lot less maintenance. If you think in terms of Ward Road in front of Leath Summit West High School was installed in 1999. For that road, the only maintenance we've done is some panel replacement. So a few locations where the slabs have cracked or heaved, we've gone in and replaced that. But we haven't had to do any surface maintenance or anything of this nature. And when we look at initial construction on our capital projects, we do what's called a life cycle cost analysis. So we can look at concrete and asphalt, and we can compare the maintenance cost over 35 years. And then we, bring it, present cost method. And so we can evaluate what we think the difference would be. And usually we find, per mile, you're looking at saving about $1 million per mile in maintenance on concrete over a 35-year life of that pavement. And so with that in mind, we kind of look at generally that initial cost for concrete. Historically, it's been higher. It's higher than asphalt, but there's been some periods where we've found concrete and asphalt at the same price head to head. I mean, it's kind of this myth now that asphalt's always cheaper. A lot of it has to do with oil prices. But then, and the other things with the asphalt pavement, like the section he showed you for 3rd Street, an equivalent concrete section would be probably about 2 inches less in thickness. So the concrete's usually not as thick as the asphalt, so it's a little bit less material. So the concrete on Ward Road, we've done zero maintenance on it since it was installed. I mean, south of county line, we've done zero maintenance on it thus far.
And it's still in great shape.
Yes, I think we may have had to reset a collar around a manhole, where there's a little offset, but it's minor stuff like that usually.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we do more concrete? Because doesn't Overland Park, isn't that what they're?
So you'll see in a lot of our capital projects, they are more so concrete. That life cycle analysis Mr. Bringer just described, it's why Pryor Road is being concrete, Colburn's concrete, Chipman's it does help our taxpayers over the longer term. And even in some cases, depending on what oil price market is, even in the short term, it's more cost effective. And you're correct. I believe Overland Park has just changed their design standards for residential subdivisions so that when development builds, they're building to a concrete standard. Of course, without that kind of regulation, they're going to go the cheapest route no matter what the life cycle cost benefit is, which is asphalt. So it might be something we have a conversation about as a city moving forward, especially we got a lot of land under the PRI ownership that is subject to a lot of single-family subdivision development in our future. whether or not the current standard should change.
I would like to see it change. Yeah. Yes, we should. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Great presentation, thank you. I guess another presentation, 2025-6798, presentation FY26 Capital Improvement Plan Update. Mr. Binger?
Okay. Please give me a minute to get set up here. All right, good evening. Again, George Binger, City Engineer. Before you this evening, this presentation is regarding our fiscal year 2026 Capital Improvement Plan summary. Basically, we're at the point now where our capital improvement plan has been posted online for public comment. Tomorrow evening, we plan on submitting the executive summary to City Council as part of a staff roundtable report. So walking through the presentation this evening, we'll walk through the process, look at some of the sequencing, discuss some of the funding mechanisms, highlight new projects, and then just kind of like a high-level overview of the proposed capital improvement plan this year. So again, this may be a refresher for some of you, but because we make a very similar presentation to the Planning Commission and Council in the past, but the CIP is a planning document. It serves two functions here. The planning document, which is a 5-year plan, we look at it and it is fiscally constrained. So every project in the CIP does have an identified funding source and includes the various capital infrastructure assets the city builds and maintains, including road, water, sanitary sewer, buildings, facilities, parks, and IT. And local practice, we're listing projects that are $75,000 or more on this. And then there's the statutory definition where you're basically highlighting the fact it's owned by a governmental agency, and then the list of assets that may be included. So I highlight this process. This is a graphic that kind of shows, because one of the questions we get a lot from council is, what about this project? How do we get this one in the CIP? And we want to try to highlight the fact that there's a lot of public input throughout the process. Yes, there's a sequence, but it takes time. I've had experience in other organizations where somebody comes in, pounds their fist on the table and says, I want this project done now, and it completely destroys the fiscal model and funding for asset management and infrastructure. And so I've seen that in other organizations I've been involved with. The process we use here at the city is very successful, and what I always encourage elected officials is realize the vision you're setting for the future, because a lot of what we're doing now are things that were set in motion years ago. It's just we kind of get to put the icing on the cake, and so a lot of things that we're doing now are setting the stage for the future. So right now we're here at this phase in the process, the public comment period. And again, this is illustrating, this is nested in our strategic plan, comp plan, infrastructure master plans we have here. As staff, we've gone through this funding process. We've gone through the kickoff meeting last fall with Public Works Committee. So we're at this phase with the public comment period. And then with these short notice injects, a lot of this is like being out for public comment now. We may get comments on projects. Well, I encourage you, okay, those are not forgotten. Okay, we've had examples where it's come in this time of year. Next year in the annual cycle, those projects have been funded in the CIP because we've identified a funding source, or we've been able to prioritize it, or things of that nature. So that's right, please understand, input now is important because it will shape, going forward next year and following years. So we look at, it's not just this public comment period where we get things online. We have the public hearing at Planning Commission. I mean, the years I've been doing this, I've had 0 in-person comments at the public hearing. We've received quite a few online. We also get a lot of injects from service requests. When residents call Public Works, we enter a service request, we go out and we look at it. An example of a project like that is Southeast Douglas. We've got lots of comments regarding stormwater, sidewalks, things of that nature over the years. It never really came into a formal process like this, but we were tracking it in all of our service requests. And so in that conversation with the elected officials, they said, yes, this is a good project to include in the bond issue program. Then we look at asset management. As Mr. Smeger described with our infrastructure programs, it's based on condition, infrastructure condition. Water Utilities does this with their water rehab program. They're tracking water main breaks, and that's how they identify sections of water main that need to be replaced. Some are directed. We have an election. A CIP sales tax will present a list of projects. Bond issues will present a list of projects like we did in 2023. Those will be included in the CIP because we have an election and the voters directed us to do it that way. Then we will look through the comprehensive and strategic plans. There's lots of goals and objectives in there related to infrastructure, quality of life, excuse me, neighborhood improvement. Those things that are that help us identify projects and evaluate for the capital improvement plan. Then we have conversations with mostly through Public Works Committee through the fall when we start the kickoff, and then now we're coming back with the presentations. Obviously, public comment forums, in-person hearings, and there's also, when we have like a project, like we'll have a public meeting for 3rd Street or Douglas Street. I mean, those are projects. People come in and review those projects. Well, they make comments about other projects too. So we capture those in that process as well. So as we go through this, obviously we're looking at council guidance. What is the direction through strategic planning? And then one of the biggest directives we've had consistently is cash flow projects when it comes to sales tax. For our CIP sales tax, transportation sales tax, water utilities, user fees, is cash flowing those projects. Those projects are not debt financed. Bond issues are a different animal when we have a general obligation bond because that is a clear direction to debt finance those. But cash flow has a big impact on how we sequence road projects that are funded through sales tax programs. And I think I've discussed the public comments and then prioritize. We talked about life cycle cost, and Vince talked about overlay. If we can get on a asset early at the right time, we can actually reduce our long-term cost when it comes to maintenance, which is usually coming out of the operating budget. So again, these are factors we look at. I think we've kind of discussed a lot of these, so let's just look at that quickly. Okay. And in this presentation, when I highlight the stars, that's trying to indicate this is someplace we've had public input, whether it be elected officials or the general public. Then we get to the review and approval process. I mentioned required projects. We have highly recommended projects. A lot of this would be like in our sales tax election. We didn't say in the ballot language we are building these projects, but when we went to the voters, we said, here's the slate of projects we intend to build with this. And we view that as a public commitment. And I think that's one of the things where we've been very successful, recently on our bond issue and sales tax elections, is the fact that we've gone to the public with a list and we fulfilled those commitments. So I think so maintaining that commitment has been very beneficial. We also like to discuss, I'll have towards the end of the presentation a list of unfunded projects, and this is kind of where we get into the dialogue. Hey, what about this? What about that? And that's where we can kind of build a bench for projects, because one of the things that we're finding with our CIP sales tax is I think this year in the CIP over the 5 years, we're estimating we've received close to $65 million in grant money. That was not forecast in 2017. When we put together that sales tax, we were programming about $10 million of revenue per year over 15 years. We did not assume we were receiving any grants because the grants are competitive, so we may or may not get them. So we're getting to a point to where I think we're looking at next year coming back of are there additional projects we're going to start discussing. We're looking at the FY27 program, because of $65 million in grant money, we now have some, significant savings in our local revenues or local expenses so that we may be able to take on some more projects. And I think that'll be a discussion we have probably, later this year, because again, we don't want to jump into this and, let's do this now, because you hear from your residents and constituents. And so we want to make sure we capture that input, that we're building a consistent message over time or input over time, as opposed to just kind of reacting to one complaint here and one there, that we actually build a consistent process. So I'll flash up towards the end. There's a slide that has a short list of projects, and those are just kind of more like conversation starters. It's not, hey, we recommend this. There are things that have been brought up in the past. And then the other part is when we get in, I mentioned about the authorization. I mentioned the 5-year plan. This is also a budget document. So FY26 will be part of the budget. So that's the actual funding authorization or allocation to move forward with these projects. And that'll be presented as part of the budget. So in the CIP, this is an example of a detail sheet. And what this is trying to show is we'll walk through the purpose, or the project description, the purpose. We identify the specific funding sources here, so you can see that this particular project, Olive and Orchard, which is a local reconstruction project, has 3 funding sources: transportation sales tax, our CIP sales tax, which is primarily which also includes stormwater, and then water construction because there's some water main relocation. We try to tie it back to our strategic plan and our comprehensive plan. And with the strategic plan, we're kind of looking at current condition, and Ignite, we're kind of looking at, the growth or the future condition is kind of the different, that's how these differ a little bit in our bubble charts. So when you look at the CIP, that's what you see in the detail sheets. These are available online in the online version. They will not be in the summary report presented tomorrow. Okay, so talk a little bit about revenue and expenses. Again, this is getting back to this cash flow. This is looking at the CIP sales tax. When this was first presented in 2016 and 17, we were looking at $150 million over these 15 years. And that's what this gold line is representing. So that's how it was, how this program was developed. Since then, we have added the use tax, which is providing about $2 million per year to this program. Sales tax revenues have exceeded our expectations. And then, as I mentioned, we have significant grant funding coming into this, these capital projects. So what we're looking at here is the red line is showing our actual expenses to date, and this includes inflation. When we looked at 2017, obviously we weren't forecasting COVID. We weren't forecasting 20% increases or 30% increases in construction costs at that time. And things of that nature. Now, more recently, that construction cost index is starting to level out. I think it's closer to 3.2% average over the last 3 years. So we're starting to see that kind of level back out a little bit and be a little more predictable. And so what you're seeing here is the red line is our actual expenses. The green line is our projected revenue. So what this is showing here, in about 5 years, we should see about, we should see some savings here. We're showing, $223 million, a little under $20 million. So we may be in that ballpark of $15 to $20 million that we may have the opportunity to take on additional projects. And so again, I'm just kind of planting that seed now for a discussion later in the year. The other element involved in this is infrastructure growth. Now, this is one that's a little more challenging trying to keep up with, because as new development comes in, that increases our pavement and stormwater infrastructure. A lot of that's coming out of the operations budget on the stormwater side, and it's also coming out of the transportation sales tax. So that's kind of what, so we're looking at a 20% growth of infrastructure, from 2022 to 23. We're adding, and as you can see over here, down here, just kind of the raw numbers, adding signals. We're at 64 signals or 67. We're looking at adding more. Each signal cost is about $500,000 to install new. And then we're looking at the annual maintenance cost of just the electricity. Controllers have to replace, every 5 to 10 years, the video detection, so there's a maintenance cost associated with that. Street lighting, as that's added, that increases our annual utility billing, which is again coming out of the operating budget. So this is kind of showing, again, this is kind of just more, just presenting this as something to consider. Again, I think this is a bigger conversation for a later time about how do we look at, funding the maintenance and support for infrastructure growth. I think some of the topics you discussed before about life cycle costs and pavement would have a huge impact on this, a positive impact. Kind of going back in time, looking at some of the, I mentioned, past councils and actions by the community that were somewhat visionary. When we look at the 1980s, that's when they adopted this transportation sales tax for 1/2 cent. Now, at the time, that was intended for large capital projects. At that time, the overlay and pavement maintenance programs were coming out of the annual operating budget. But as you can see with the growth of infrastructure, it outgrew the operating budget. So we were able to look, this is capital maintenance, these are significant improvements, so we started using this fund for that. With that in mind, now we're looking at, okay, how do we build new projects? And of course, that's been that continuation of the 1997 sales tax. We had the excise tax that was permanent. 1997 was a 1/2 cent sales tax. And then it's been renewed twice since then. Parks and Recreation. You'll see a lot of their capital projects are funded through this 1/4 cent sales tax through Parks and Rec. What I forgot to mention on the sales tax too, we're using that for just general right-of-way infrastructure so that we can cover things like the railroad spur maintenance. We have 2 railroad spurs that the city owns, and every now and then we get a call from the Union Pacific saying they can't service it anymore because it needs new ties or the rails need to be straightened, re-gauged, things of that nature. And then aviation, we've used this for like our local matches for aviation grants. So this helped like with the runway extension and expansion, and it's paying for some of the local expenses like Hangar 2 and the new admin building. The excise tax, again, this is that tax on development for changes in traffic. This doesn't generate a lot of revenue every year, but over time, about $500,000 a year. But over time, this built up a balance. This became the local match when we were applying for the governor cost share grant and the surface transportation grant on the 291 interchange. So again, this program is helping with that project because it is, obviously it's redevelopment, it's helping with growth in that area, but it also provided us that local seed money to compete for and successfully compete for grant money. And that actually, I think we're in the neighborhood about $14 million in grant money on that project. And then, of course, our bond issue, $98 million in transportation for 13 projects, emergency preparedness, municipal facilities. And again, all those are shown in this CIP. All those projects are shown in this CIP. And then the use tax, that is something that has, it's outperformed the initial expectations. I mean, it's probably 2 or 3 times what we were expecting as far as annual revenue, from the initial projections. Okay, long-term commitments. My first project with the city in 1999 was working on Todd George and Scruggs Road. That project was based on an alignment study done in 1968. What that alignment study did, though, was it set the stage so as a development came in, it was dedicating right-of-way for that roadway. So we already had the alignment set up. We weren't going back to residents and say, oh, by the way, we're putting a road in your front yard, taking additional right-of-way. And there's a significant savings in right-of-way cost too, because we weren't having to acquire all that. It was already dedicated. So that thinking long-term is very beneficial. We're trying to do something similar with Shearer Parkway with that alignment study on the PRI property. When you look at Ward Road, going from 3rd Street south the county line, that's been done in several phases. The first was a bond issue in 1997 from 3rd Road down to Shearer, just past Shearer, and then again in 1999, and then the last phase completed in 2016. 291 South Corridor, again, if you think of how that's been done incrementally, Jefferson, Decker, the interchange, and now we're looking at Oldham Village kind of being that finishing piece. So this idea of this long-term commitment, being nested within the comprehensive plan is very beneficial. Quick summary on our sales tax project. Again, I mentioned this is what was presented to the voters, is what we would do. The ones that are lined out are completed, and the ones that are highlighted in gold are underway. They're either in construction or in design at this point. So looking at this year's capital improvement plan, okay, what we have include from prior years and FY26, $442 million of construction work, of design and construction work. Over the 5-year period, we're looking at $778 million over this 5-year period. This year, FY25, we completed 21 projects that will no longer be shown in the CIP that totaled about $30 million of work. We're adding 27 new projects. Now this will include like new programs like the FY30 overlay program, FY30 water rehab. That's about $68 million of new work over the next 5 years. So that's the big level summary of this year's CIP. This is what it looks like in a table. This is the summary table where you can see it's broken out by the type of work here, the public works, airport, water, sewer, by year, and then the total we're looking at proposing for each year. Okay, I mentioned unfunded projects. So again, these are projects we've brought forward. Several years ago, Lakewood Way was identified as north of Bowling Road as something that needed improvement. We got a lot of public comment on that. I think one year we received over 15 comments in the online forum for that. At the time, we're like, we have no money. We came forward with a proposed bond issue, and based on that input, guidance from council, that was one of the projects that was presented in that bond issue. And so that is now funded. Airport Hangar 2, Southeast Douglas, Shearer. So these are projects that have been previously identified as unfunded that have been funded. Things that we've discussed, annually we do a presentation on local transit service. At this point, there hasn't been direction to fund it yet. Again, we bring it up every year just to keep it in front. And again, that's subject to guidance and how we want to move forward with that. Traffic signals, those are generally more driven by traffic conditions. So there's specific warrants that an intersection must meet, regards to traffic volume and safety and speeds and things of that nature. If it starts to meet 2 or 3 of those warrants, if it does meet, then we will program that as a traffic signal. So those are examples of things that may be driven more, from that user level. And then sometimes if we have something like some of the bridge decks we look at, then we go out, we do the annual bridge inspections, like this needs to be redone. That infrastructure condition will put it into this, we'll put it onto the capital improvement plan. So looking at more unfunded projects, again, this is just more of a kind of a conversation starter, things that we've heard as staff. I'm sure there's things that have been heard, that your constituents will bring up. And then kind of like a purpose behind these. I mentioned the railroad spur, that's based on infrastructure condition. Something like the MoDOT intersections, again, that becomes a conversation with the city. How much is the city willing to spend on MoDOT infrastructure? And I know that's been a topic of discussion in the past. Again, I bring us back to the process. Again, just trying to keep this in front of everybody, encourage people. This is, in my opinion, this has been working because, I use the example of Lakewood Way. I'll use the example of Southeast Douglas. The fact that we are getting that input, it is being driven by the public, it is being driven by guidance from council, that, we are, able to cash flow projects, and that we know that when we have money available, we need to come back and ask, what's your priority? Okay, so next steps where we're at now. So we've gone through the kickoff process. The city staff, we pretty well drafted the CIP. When I say city staff, this involves basically every department in the city. I know in the past I've said we have about 30 people involved. I think that number seems to go up every year as far as the people involved in this for all the departments. And there's a lot of crosstalk from the departments trying to coordinate so that we're not doing the overlay program and coming back 6 months later and putting a new water main through it. So it's that type of coordination. Or we're building a new road and water utility says, hey, we want to replace this water main so they can fold it into that project, and it saves them a little money and effort in that regard. Again, we're at this stage here with the Public Works Committee meeting for this initial presentation. We're looking at the summary report. It's just that executive summary will be submitted in staff roundtable tomorrow evening. Then we're looking at Planning Commission hearing towards the end of this month. No, I'm sorry. April 24th. And then we go through the resolution to adopt it as an amendment to the comp plan. And then that resolution gets presented to council, and then this is folded into the budget. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions, discussion. I'm sure as if you think of things, you'll let Michael know or Ryan know, hey, what about this project? Or I got a comment from residents in this area.
Is there any way you can tell everyone where they can find the online public comment forum?
Yes, I included it in the executive summary, a web link. The easiest way is go to the city website and then search for CIP summary or capital improvement plan. And it takes you to that webpage.
And I think somebody shared it on the city Facebook page. Yep. Hasn't it been? Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's been advertised on various social outlets that our Creative Services Division manages. And if you just, as Mr. Binger said, go to the city's website, put CIP up in the top search box, and it'll pull up not only the opportunity for public comment, but the current capital improvement plan, the draft version of the plan, our capital projects dashboard, where there's a lot of information about current activities that are going on. So a lot of information out there to share, and encourage your constituents to review and make their comments known, because again, as we started this conversation, what we find out now will have an influence in the coming year and years as we develop out the CIP. I also like to take a moment and say thanks to all of those involved, including Mr. Binger, in developing this CIP. You'll see we're actually a month ahead of schedule. We're doing that because we need to be coordinated with our overall budget, which is on an accelerated schedule this year to the deployment of a new ERP system.
I emphasize this is the draft version.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I have one question and throw at me over there. So what determines, help me, I know we've talked about this.
George. I'm sorry,
I was making
I'm
sure
messing
Ryan
with the
wasn't getting
computer.
ready to throw anything.
Here we go.
So I'm going to reference something that we've beat up quite a bit. So the Macadoodles, intersection, all of that kind of stuff. So what determines that intersection? When Macadoodles was going in, it determined that we had to put the median in there. The talk was the city had that in the capital improvement plan, but that was something that was down the road. What determines that as a cost to the city, but not a cost to the developer? Because we see these things when a developer's putting something in, hey, during your project, part of your project, you have to put in, the traffic warrants, you have to put in this intersection, this light, this medium, whatever.
So, yeah, there's a lot of coordination that happens with development, especially development that comes through a preliminary development plan, rezoning application that the city council considers for approval. And in each one of those projects go through the same review to see that it meets our standards, our code requirements, and that its impacts are being mitigated, the impacts that it causes to the public systems. whether that be stormwater, transportation, whatever those public infrastructure impacts need to be mitigated. If a recommended improvement is already in our capital improvement plan such that it's going to begin construction, and we believe that we're going to time that work in a way that it doesn't impair or harm the public in any way, so say a signal's going in, that development's concurrent with that signal, and we are controlling that schedule so that the signal will be done before they're ready to be issued occupancy, they don't need to do that work. We've already got it funded, we're carrying out that work. Now, if you're looking at something that's in the CIP 3 years or 4 years down the road, you may see it also an obligation of the developer because that improvement's critical, that it's in place for the public health and safety and welfare. Maybe it's a sewer line, maybe it's a water line, something to service that development. They will also be obligated to make that same improvement even though it's in the CIP. But for those improvements, they got to have it open and ready to go. There are others, and you saw on kind of this list of unfunded projects and bench, and we build this list based on public comments. Some of those comments come before you in development applications. That's where we identified the Purcell's Road median and access control issues. We were aware of that based on public comments about safety in that area. The developments have come through. They need to meet all of our code requirements for access management. And we said, okay, let's put it on our bench. Maybe we can address that, but you've seen as the Oldham Village developments come before we're ready to build anything, they're addressing it now as a condition of their approval. When it goes back to your reference of Macadoodles, there wasn't enough nexus between those public improvements and their impact that the city council at that time said, yeah, we don't think that the Macadoodle should be required to make those improvements off-site when there just wasn't the impact to be mitigated, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So some of these projects that you see on the list might be addressed by development before we as a city and taxpayers are ready to address them.
Okay. No, I appreciate it. Thank you for answering that. That's all.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions? No. Then that was a good presentation. Thank you. The next one, 2025-6886, Stormwater Utility Update, April 2025.
Before Mr. Binger introduces himself again for this presentation, I'll just remind everyone, it was the City Council that directed this priority goal be sent to Public Works Committee. And so the intent really, as you'll see in the presentation, is to kind of do some history, a little background, bring you up to where we were roughly 2 years ago in a series of questions. And then I think in the next few work sessions we'll have with committee, we'll start to dive deeper into those questions, getting answers as we start to move this priority goal forward.
And before we turn it over to Mr. Binger, I'll just add just a quick reminder about the council goals. There were 4 priority council goals that were identified. Those goals include our solid waste, housing, beautification, and stormwater, and not necessarily in that order. We have had conversations as the council as a whole about all 4 and the approach to take to try to take the really big topics and get them down into actionable items in that process that we're utilizing for that. So you've had a conversation over solid waste and a lot of detailed history on that. At tomorrow night's council meeting, we will be discussing the beautification topic as well, and then we have housing scheduled to come before the full council in May. And so again, like Mr. Park said, tonight we're talking stormwater. Just wanted to remind everybody the context of all 4 of those council goals.
Okay. All right. Good evening, George Binger, City Engineer. Okay. As stated, the purpose of this presentation is to kind of walk through some of the history, get us up to this point, and then see where we want to, go from here on this. And what you see on the cover slide are some of the past iterations to look at. One of the goals in this is overall is looking at a level of service for stormwater and then identifying dedicated funding to match that level of service. So that's kind of what the overall goal of this is. And so these are some of the attempts, 2004 through 2008 to current, where we're looking at this. And so again, we're looking at as Mr. Elam had mentioned, this is one of those four major council goals. Kind of walk through, why this topic of a dedicated stormwater funding source has come up repeatedly. And then, just understanding how, the impact this has. Because, one of the biggest hurdles we face on stormwater is it's rarely seen, and it doesn't seem to affect everyone, even though it does. And then just kind of walk through this history and the fact that in the IGNITE plan, in the strategic plans, the idea of a dedicated stormwater funding source and utility was one of the goals and objectives brought forth in those plans. Then I'll kind of walk through some of our current issues and then recap what we've done with the stormwater utility rate study up to this point, because we had met with the stormwater advisory committee, a group of a citizen task force, and walked through that process and it presented their initial recommendations. Okay, so one issue with stormwater is flooding. Okay, so what you're seeing here are pictures of flooding events in Leath Summit. Our current level of service really is we are enrolled in the National Flood Insurance Program. That's pretty much where we're at. If we have flooding, we just wait until the water recedes. And then post-flooding cleanup, then we go out and we have to do, in certain areas, like if it's at a map flood hazard, we have to do inspections for structural damage, do damage assessments. And at that point, the maintenance is very minimal. It's usually clean up. If we have a clogged pipe, we jet it out. If we have a clogged inlet, we clean the inlet, and that's pretty much it. But there's really no improvement or no action for potentially mitigating the risk of future flooding. Areas of repetitive flooding, these are areas that we track in Public Works as part of our flood insurance program, community rating system program, is we have to keep track of repetitive flooding. This area here on the left is Oak Ridge Meadows along the Little Blue River. And what this is showing is the currently mapped flood hazard area. And this stretch of properties here have a history of flooding repeatedly. Now, as we're looking at what's happening going forward, FEMA is in the process, or SEMA, the State Emergency Management Agency, is in the process of remapping the Little Blue watershed. And with this, the rainfall data keeps getting updated, and it usually means there's more rain per storm event. And the other thing they're doing from a system of, they're changing the modeling method. Used to be it was 1D, you looked at it, you kind of drew a line, and that was your flood elevation. Now they're looking at, it's called two-dimensional modeling. Supposedly it's more refined. Corps of Engineers done a study on this area as well. We're seeing two proposed models that show most of this area here being inundated in a 1% storm event. Now, that's proposed. When those come out, there's a period of public comment and review and back and forth to get the final version. But understanding that what the model, the people that do the stormwater modeling are looking at is there's the potential for a significant increase in the number of properties at risk to this type of flooding. Over here on the right, we have, excuse me, this is an area, Langsford Road, this is Battery Drive, there's a culvert here that regularly overtops. And this is an area that in 2007, this home, was not in the flood hazard area. And if you look at it now, they are. So that meant in 2017, they received a notice from their mortgage company. They had to obtain insurance after this remapping sequence. So those are some of the things that we're not really able to account for. We don't really have a way to address it. So in our current level of service, we really have no method or funding or program to address or mitigate risk for this type of flooding due to this type of stream flooding. Another common issue we have is erosion and sinkholes. Now, if you think of sinkholes, this is catastrophic failure. So this is, if you think in terms of pavement, this is pothole patching. So a lot of the reason we have that pavement maintenance program is we're trying to eliminate potholes before they happen. Well, currently we have no means to do this. So when we get a sinkhole open up like this where somebody's fence post, backyard, probably their cable or Google fiber line coming to the house or neighborhood, swing set, forms this large sinkhole because this metal pipe here has collapsed. And so an example of this happened in 2019 where we had a sinkhole that was threatening a tree falling onto a house. We had to do emergency budget amendment, emergency repair for over $600,000 for that one event. That just addressed one sinkhole. Then we've done what we periodically do is when we have big projects that are pretty much, it's usually not beyond the capability of our crew, it's just beyond their capacity. Their workload cannot get to these. So if we have to contract repair, we look at anywhere from $9,000 to $100,000 per location on some of the, bringing our on-call contract in. And when we look at, the average cost for repairing a sinkhole is about $53,000 per location. So that when our operations crew has to go out and fix the sinkhole. One of the biggest factors in all this is corrugated metal pipe. Corrugated metal pipe became common practice generally in the 1970s and 80s because before that you either had concrete pipe or clay pipe. Plastic pipe hadn't been invented yet, wasn't common at that time. And so this came in, it's at the time when it's first put in, it's a solid structure, it can support loads. But the problem with corrugated metal pipe is it will rust and corrode. We have corrosive soils. Clay will create that galvanic or chemical reaction between the clay and the metal that will cause the bottom to rust out. And it can start, generally the bottom rusts out first because you have a large storm flow, you're pushing rock and debris, so you're scratching that galvanized coating off. That allows it to rust. And so what you're looking at here, this is what it looks like on the surface, is you see this little hole here. And then we go in and we look at the end, and this whole pipe is, the bottom of it is gone. There's not much there. And so our current level of service is, we go out, we put an orange fence around to it, and we'll come back and fix it when we can. Because then this gets back to capacity for our crews. The example of this one down here in the bottom right, as you'll notice, the sinkhole here is right next to the house. So this is typically where, we could, if we had to go through it and contract or repair, we're basically trying to do it like a trenchless repair, where we can reline the pipe. And you'll see some discussion later, that's a maintenance technique we could use that hopefully would be able to prevent this type of catastrophic failure in the future. But we currently don't have that capacity or level of service. Okay, streams and water quality, that's another issue related to stormwater. This being a sewer main that's exposed. Unfortunately, that's more common than what we would like. Just generally, because sewers follow gravity, so generally the stream is a low point. And as streams move over time, they may encroach upon a sewer main. Sometimes we have sewer and water main crossings. This is an area where we have, at the bottom, you see the trees here. The bottom of these trees are along a creek. Erosion along the outside of the creek has eroded the bottom of the slope, causing this failure. That slope is falling into the creek in the backyard here. And then we also have this other issue with water quality, where if you get large amounts of mud flowing into a creek, that tends to kill whatever aquatic life may be in that stream. So with our current system, we're looking at over 300 miles of pipe, of which 110 miles is metal pipe. Over the last couple years, we've removed and replaced 1.5 miles of metal pipe. Then we've got over 18,000 structures. Those are basically concrete inlets, junction boxes. Those are things that have to be cleaned. They get clogged. Sometimes you have to pop the lid, clean them out. Buried structures, city-owned channel. Now, this is a big issue on level of service. The city does not own stream channels. The very few stream channels we own are mostly in public parks. We own 12 miles of stream channel. And when we look at basins, These are like detention basins or impoundments. The city has 22 basins that the city actually owns, so that means those are 22 the city has to maintain. Most of the basins in town are privately owned. Privately owned, privately maintained. And that's there's a lot of, that's a lot of our service requests for going out and looking at these private basins and trying to explain to people this is their responsibility. And then a BMP is best management practice. An example of that would be like a rain garden. I think we have one over in Grant Park, or Williams Grant Park. We have one there by 2nd and Blue Parkway. These are basically rain garden type places that they'll hold water for a short period of time, and they filter it, creating a water quality effect. So basically, that's the system. Of note down here, we're looking at, out of the metal pipe, we basically have 95,000 feet or within 10 feet of an occupied structure. That basically means it's a pipe running between two homes next to a commercial building, and that's something that we're looking to assess and evaluate, because those get very challenging if we have to go in and maintain those, especially for trenching between two homes that are 20 or 30 feet apart. Okay, so our current level of service, typically we only deal with failed infrastructure, sinkholes. We may address improvements if it's part of a road project. And then we're looking at, in 2007, we had a $12 million bond issue for stormwater capital, and this was intended to mitigate reports of structural flooding or current phases where like a home or a building was flooding due to a lack of public infrastructure or failed public infrastructure. And that's trying to mitigate that specific situation. Again, this doesn't address the stream flooding like I talked about on those maps. Then we have public works operations. Generally what we look at there is immediate life and safety threats from failed infrastructure, pipe collapse, sinkhole. I know years ago we had out on Shearer Road a culvert, had collapsed, so we had to close Shearer Road, and we don't have a choice. We have to stop what we're doing and fix those. The issue is that our current operations crews cannot keep pace with the need and demand for this. The other issues that we have to deal with on stormwater is permit compliance. The city has a municipal separate storm sewer system permit, MS4, which is a water quality permit issued through the EPA, through the Department of Natural Resources that we have to comply with. That addresses water quality. So we have to comply with that permit. That's things like that. That's what leads to our erosion and sediment control programs and regulations. We also have a public education requirement, at which time we do not have a public educator on staff. And then trying to look at more proactive inspections and improvements to where we can inspect pipe and do routine maintenance so we're not fixing sinkholes. So if you look at the number of service requests and work orders we've had over the last 10 years, this is just a printout of the map we have, and you can see it pretty well covers the entire city. Generally, a service request is somebody calls in and says, hey, I'd like you to come look at this. It may be us going out and talking to a property owner about why their backyard is flooding, or looking at maybe some erosion around their house. A work order is we're actually going out and fixing something. So our operations crew affectionately refers to themselves as the Band-Aid crew because they feel like that's all they're doing is putting Band-Aids on problems. So this is kind of walking through about a year ago. This is a culvert that, it was spring, finishing snow event, so we don't have sinkholes, so let's see if we can get out ahead and fix some things. So, look at this culvert here, and if you'll notice that this tube is full of grass or weeds, that means there's a lot of dirt in there. So it's clogged, so they need to go out and clean that. So okay, let's start a work order to do this. Well, they get called off because they run into this. We have a sinkhole in one of our streets, so I have to go and pull this pipe out, and as you can see in this picture, the bottom of the pipe is missing. And then they go into the inlet in the structure, and they're at this segment of pipe. They look that way down the next segment, which is going under the curb, and they see, well, this is starting to go. You can see this here where the pipe has started to separate a little bit, and they kind of have to put blinders on and say, no, we're not touching it. because we got to fix the sinkhole here, because that is our level of service at this point. We don't have that proactive maintenance at this point in time. So when you look at, this is what the sinkhole looks like from the surface. You can see there's the hole. You can see this is probably about, in the ground about 18 inches here. This is the curb and the corner of the asphalt. This is what it looks like when they get into the repair. So now they've removed the old pipe. So here's the trench going across the street. And of course you can see the street's closed in this situation as they're working the way across. They put the pipe in. This is flow fill coming over the top of it. As they're working through this, they've got it open temporarily with steel plates. And so that one's going to finish up fairly soon. Meanwhile, this one's still sitting here. They haven't touched it. So then they get called over to this location where, yeah, it looks great, till you look in the pipe and you see this separation here. And they're looking at it, well, it hasn't failed, so there's really nothing we can do at this point. Then you come down here, you look at the other end, and this is the upstream end where it's got all this debris flowing into the pipe. And you look in the pipe, and yeah, we can see there it's offset, a bunch of debris. Not a lot we can do at this point. It hasn't failed. So then other issues, cleaning out culverts and streams leading up to it. This is an example of a sinkhole in someone's yard. Again, this is still sitting here. We haven't got back to it yet on that culvert. This is their work trying to clean that. This is actually a basin that the city owns. And so they're maintaining this because a basin has to have volume to hold the water for detention so we didn't get downstream flooding. So that's kind of like a typical day in the life of the Band-Aid crew. So one of the concepts or terms for dedicated funding is a stormwater utility, stormwater user fee. So the idea behind this is that rainfall impacts all properties. It impacts land use, it impacts waterways, lakes. That's where the water's going to end up, and it affects everyone in the community. Another way to look at this too is stormwater is not a problem or an issue. It is a resource. I mean, if you think in terms of drought versus too much rain versus Longview Lake, Legacy Lake, things where we have certain amenities and benefits, rain barrels, how stormwater can be used as a resource for our benefit. We're looking at, the federal permit compliance, potential cost savings. If we're able to maintain things up front, we're not fixing sinkholes later. Moving from that proactive, moving from a reactive to a proactive type of maintenance. The other, sustainable funding. Currently the only funding we've had has been a bond issue. A portion of the 2017 sales tax for capital projects, not for maintenance. And then with maintenance, it's in that general fund, so it's competing with everything else in the general fund. Looking at infrastructure, are we looking at ways to mitigate, future flooding through capital improvement projects? Again, water quality, erosion control, litter. We talked about, beautification has been a big topic for the community. Again, Stream Team is one of our efforts that we have with the stormwater, but it's strictly a volunteer thing that happens twice a year on city streams, so it's happening in a park. So if we look at, do we want to change that level of service? The other things we can look at are design standards. Is there ways to, regarding stream setbacks, things of that, and then public education. How can we get the message out? How do we, again, we do not have a public educator on staff, so we don't have that consistent method for public education. So again, this level of service pretty much becomes a policy decision. If residents are happy with the current level of service, then that's what we'll move forward with. If we're looking at something different, improved level of service, then we're looking, we're talking about ways we could potentially fund that. And again, stormwater, if we look at infrastructure programs, the purpose of this chart is to show that the different, main types of infrastructure, and we could probably add facilities to this one. There's an ongoing evaluation program and maintenance program. Stormwater is the only one that does not have a preventive maintenance program at this time. Again, Mr. Smager had illustrated preventive maintenance, the idea that if you spend a little money now, you're not spending a lot of money later. And again, it's kind of the idea of sinkholes versus preventive maintenance. And so if you just kind of substitute pavement for, stormwater, sinkhole is when we're removing and replacing pipe. That's that failure. So if we look at, again, I was kind of looking at, just sinkholes as that indicator of reactive maintenance. If we look at all of our stormwater work orders, we had over 3,000, 380 are related to sinkholes, so that's 10%. If you look at the difference of cost, you're looking at 10% of the work orders account for a third of the cost. And then if we look at, and so anyway, so that's kind of what we're looking at is you have this very high cost item with not a whole lot of improvement to the system. And I've mentioned some of these things like jetting, slip lining, relining, grouting the bottom of pipes. These are preventive maintenance or mid-level maintenance that could help us in that area. The other thing we look at is consequence of failure. This is, again, dealing with public safety, health, and welfare. One of the biggest ones, we have road closures. If we have a culvert fail on Ward Road, that is a significant closure. We look at damage to structures and properties. We look at, emergency repairs are obviously more expensive. Channel erosion, we get a lot of complaints on that, stream channel erosion, because streams move. And it's getting close to somebody's house. Right now, we don't have a mechanism to deal with that. Okay, so talking about this idea of a stormwater utility for dedicated funding. I kind of put this together showing our history in the stormwater, how it's come through, paralleling, current events. We started talking about this back in the 1990s with the master plan, and then that 2002 was when it was finally published, which led to the Stormwater Citizen Task Force in 2003 and 4. And you can see that what came out of that recommendation was establish a stormwater utility based on a user fee. And then we come back to 2007, we had the LS 360 strategic plan. And again, we recommend a stormwater utility be established. And we started pursuing that. Then, of course, 2008 and 9, recession happens, not a good time. Then jump to 2016. Okay, let's look at this again. We've got, again, more issues, more complaints. 2017, we put some money into the capital improvement sales tax for stormwater, about another $25 million. Now, again, this is limited to mitigating structural flooding. There's also about $5 million for core CMP pipe replacement. But we're also looking at things like, do we have other projects, road projects that we can include in this? An example of this was the project we did near Ward and Lee Drive, I guess Longview Road. And we did a couple of stream bank stabilization projects as part of this. But these bank stabilization was related to public infrastructure. We're trying to protect bridges and roads that were being encroached. Then we visit the strategic plan, the IGNITE plan. Again, it proposed a stormwater utility. And then that's when the actual study, to go forward with the study to evaluate how would we set up a study, was funded in fiscal year 22. And then this has come back, recently as part of the council retreat to kind of re-engage this issue. So this is kind of how it lines up in the strategic plan. And then we're looking at, again, in the comp plan, it has these goals, create the utility, other mechanisms that it supports. I'm going through this quickly. Sorry. So the Stormwater Advisory Committee. This group met 3 times. It was various stakeholders, included the Leath Summit School District, Parks Department, Longview Community College, Raintree HOA, some other HOAs and citizens, representatives from the development community. And we looked at sales tax, property tax, this idea of a user fee. This group recommended the user fee. They recommended operations maintenance based on 2 crews dedicated to stormwater full-time. This is what came, at this time, again, this is going to be 2022 numbers, so a little bit of inflation on this. The annual cost would be about $4.7 million. Now, I know one of the questions from council was, can we add capital, small capital projects to this? And at this time, we were looking at about another $1 million per year in capital. And again, that'll be some of the conversation we have. Are there other opportunities in that area? And so if we look at it, one of the things that when they looked at this idea of the impervious or a user fee, the idea looked at as a residential unit. They basically established a billing unit as being 500 square feet of impervious area. The median home in Leath Summit, the median has about 3,500 square feet, which would be 7 billing units, which came out to about this $99 per year. Now that would be for this level of service here with the crews. So if you're going to add 20% to that, roughly, or 30% to get to the CIP, this gets up to be maybe close to 130 per year. Again, that's based on the median home. Now you start looking at commercial, industrial, and other, there's different factors of what different folks would pay, or different users would pay. So again, we're trying to get at what would we be doing this money? Well, one is we'd be starting doing the proactive inspections to get that condition assessment. We would allow us early detection. It would allow us to build that GIS database or layer with the conditions so that we can now prioritize. In a lot of ways, water utilities is doing that with their break history. They can see where water mains are going. We're doing that with our pavement inspections. It allows us to get out and do the pipe and inlet cleaning. Clean the inlets. We don't have trash flushing to the end of the pipe. We don't have as much silt and sediment. We're looking at the culvert cleaning. That example I said where we started, and it's still kind of sitting there, and allows us more options to get on the proactive side. And then we look at public education. That's a big part of stormwater management that most every community has, and that would be something that we would be able to ramp up quite a bit. So if we look at, I talked about lining. Here's a metal pipe before. This is an example of the problem we had with it. We went in and we did, an assessment on it. We were able to reline it, and this is what it looks like after the fact. And this is kind of like a structural lining. So if you looked at it, if we did the remove and replace, it would be about $720,000. We'd have the extended road closure to repair it. When we did this one, this is actually one we did under Rice Road. It was about, so this is a fairly large culvert. We're looking at, about half the price to do that with about a 5 to 10 day interruption. So again, that's kind of where we're looking at some of the things we could benefit from that dedicated maintenance funding. Resources, again, staffing, technical staff, the operations staff, technical staff, customer service staff, equipment in the field, and then these programs. Again, I think small capital improvements is one we'd be looking at, public education, litter control, beautification. Like when we think about rain gardens, those look nice, but they take a lot of maintenance. The idea is, how do we convey an unseen need? It's really hard to see something that's underground. There's a lot of common misunderstandings. We've talked to quite a few people. They don't know what happens when stormwater goes down the street. They don't know where it goes. Or they think that by draining their chlorinated pool water into the inlet, it doesn't have any impact on the stream. They don't know where it's going. And then, we need to look at, okay, if we're going to use a user fee, there's billing and collection. How do we approach that? So again, we're looking at, with that public engagement, we've had several SWAC members say they'd be willing to help with that. We have several HOAs that were very engaged and would be supportive of that. And then, other things we might have going forward. So questions we had from last year from City Council is, why do we need this level of service? Again, I'm trying to illustrate this as sinkholes, the volume of sinkholes failure, the idea that the work need exceeds the capacity of our current crew, and we can't get ahead. We don't have this opportunity for preventive maintenance. What would we get? Well, again, the idea is that proactive maintenance, we're reducing the risk of structural flooding, the public education, permit compliance, and a lot of that is looking at this stormwater as a resource. what is our longer-term capital improvement plan for stormwater and what would be included in this utility? Do we want to put more utility funding in, either like a sales tax program, a user fee program? Do we want to look at expanding to private property? Do we want to expand to stream banks? How much do we want to expand the capital improvements? And then would we be willing to take on some of these private basins? I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of private detention basins in town. Is that something the city wants to take on? Again, these are policy level decisions that would drive the funding level. Or is it we want to take more of a partnership approach with these private basins? And then how do we bill? I mean, there's two common billing methods. One is monthly as part of either a utility bill, a consolidated municipal billing system. Another part is an annual bill on property tax. And then there's pros and cons to each. And I think these are probably more discussions in the future. And then how do we update rates as costs change or as needs change? So then, obviously we look at, okay, currently it is our opinion this user fee should go to the voters as a ballot measure. So then what does that look like? As far as communication, support, approach, and then when are we looking at having this on the ballot? That's kind of the next question. And then other questions that we may have. I think that's pretty much all I have. I'll turn it over to you all now for questions or discussion. I'm sure there's lots of questions and trying to formulate this.
Yeah.
And this may be a time, I don't know if you want to just have some time to formulate questions and maybe we come back as a discussion item later.
So I would say if we could just keep the discussion at, have we identified the right questions? Again, we're not intended to get into the weeds, if you will, on any one of these, but this was kind of like our opener, if you will, for the whole topic. And so you've seen the questions Mr. Binger's put forward, along with the history and the background and kind of framing the whole problem. Or issue, as you said, don't call stormwater
attempt. Attempt thereof.
But we want to make sure, though, that we have all the right questions. So as we come back in more work sessions, we're addressing the issues that you want to be brought forward for discussion.
That was what I was going to say, was that this is a really good framework for us to use when we come back to do stormwater. I had a lot of questions about it, but I won't get way into the weeds with it. I can do that then.
Member Carlisle?
Thank you, and I'm not going to get into the weeds at all. I just had two quick questions. And as far as the corrugated metal pipe that keeps breaking down, do we still use that? Is that still what's getting used? So when we replace that, are we replacing that with concrete or?
No. Our current design criteria requires either reinforced concrete pipe or plastic pipe. And that is currently in our design and construction manual. So developers are required to use that for public infrastructure. Now, in private infrastructure, like under a parking lot or commercial lot, we have not restricted that.
So that they can use whatever they want. We haven't restricted it, but once it fails, we fix it?
If it's private, no.
Okay. And then the second question I had was, when you showed that the metal pipe that was broken down and then you showed it lined, what is that liner?
There's several ways to line the pipe. This one is more like a resin, and it's called cured in place pipe. And so that resin goes in, it's kind of like it's like a fiberglass reinforced resin, and so it does have structural strength to it. Other times they can be slip lined, like you can take another pipe and slide it through the pipe. So those are the two common methods.
I'll just say, you just approved a CIPP, that's what that acronym is referring to, on a sewer job. So sewer and stormwater, they're using very similar
Okay, that's what I know that we've done that, like downtown, the really good smelling stuff, right? Yeah.
And Mr. Elam just mentioned, I don't think any developers using even for private metal pipe at this point.
They know that it has a fail rate, so they don't even want to do it.
Now MoDOT will use some, although they tried, I think, an application of plastic pipe. And last summer when we had some some floods, they realize it has to have a certain depth and effective embedment, or it lifts itself straight up out of the pavement, just like we saw out on Ranson Road. If you recall, that happened last year. So.
I think this is great, and yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, and we probably really need to get on it so that we can stop talking about it and start doing something.
Yep, not to go in the weeds, but just for, as Councilmember Rader said, this gives a good starting point. When you talk about, back in the presentation, you said crews. You said 2 crews and support, 2 crews plus CIP. What are those, in your mind, what do those crews look like? Is it a 6-man crew, 5-man crew?
It would be a 5-man crew with a supervisor. And then, so I have 2 5-man crews. Each crew would have a foreman or a lead, and then there'd be a supervisor over those 2 crews. And then, plus their equipment. So that's what's included in that. Now, also included in this is the support. It's like if we need staff for customer service to field phone calls, it would include 1, possibly 2 engineers for that type, to support that, and then a public educator.
I get in the weeds.
Yeah, I know. I'm not, I got some. Yeah, there you go. No, actually, Chair, if I may, I was going to ask just a few questions to try to provide us with some direction on what we can bring back for the next conversation. Because I really think that that's one of the things that we're trying to establish is what information needs to be prepared, analyzed, and brought back for the committee to discuss. So if there are some high-level questions, don't hesitate to ask those right now. If we're looking for what information is needed in order to help facilitate the decision-making process on this. It's a big topic. That's one of the reasons why it's a big council goal, and as you can tell, it's got to be, well, it is spring right now. We'll probably hear some calls about it for sure. But is there any specific information or is there different options that you'd like to see presented?
Okay, so I'll start us off. In my mind, I think what you have here, I want to know, what does this cost now? 2 full-time crews and support. What is this going to cost us? And what does that question look like on the ballot? What are we asking? Those are the 2 things I want to know.
I think from going off what Councilmember Carlisle just said, I think I would like a good opinion of what staff thinks is going to work best. Is this a rate increase? Is this a property tax situation? I mean, where does it pare down for staff that we think is, I guess, coming from staff that's going to fit our constituents the best? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess it works if you talk right into the microphone a little bit better. Yeah, if I heard your question correctly, that is, what is the best mechanism in order to fund this? Right. And that we do have a lot of information on that was done with the rate study that was completed 22? Yeah, 2 years ago. So I think an overview of the rate study and where the results of the rate study would be good. Maybe not the details of how things were calculated, but the summary.
Yep. No, thank you.
Additional?
Well, I had, I think, 2 simple questions, but I guess I was curious as to why, going back to one of the slides about that we were focusing on preventive, but was the first thing that we were going to focus on. I think it was you were talking about.
Yeah, do you have a slide number on there?
No, I didn't write it down. But,
Bottom right?
Okay. But maybe I can help with that.
Okay.
But why wouldn't we start with doing the repairs that are, and because is it a CIP issue that you can't just go in, we get the money, and then you just go in and you start making all the repairs of things that you need to be done? Or, that makes sense?
What I would suggest, kind of what we've tried to do with our CM, is we'd want to do a two-pronged approach. We obviously want to do some capital because, we want to get stuff fixed up front that high consequence of failure, high demand. Stuff we know has got to get fixed, we'd work on that. But we don't want to, but if we have this opportunity to start going down the proactive, preventive maintenance route, let's get the condition assessment, let's start working on those issues. And it'll be kind of more like, hopefully the idea is, if we're doing the repairs here, proactive cost is down lower. Over time, we start to balance those out. So, I mean, kind of our approach as staff has been, we want to show progress. So if we sit here and we spend 3 years doing a study trying to figure out what we have and nothing gets put in the ground, that doesn't build credibility. So we would definitely want to, if there's, we have high priority, high consequence of failure issues, we want to work on that now. I mean, that's, an example of that would have been that pipe we lined on Rice Road near Hy-Vee. I mean, it was high consequence of failure. We can't wait.
I think this is a great, the presentation is great for us to just study off of. Really, when we get back together to do stormwater, I think it'll be a great framework for us to study and really come up with lots of really good questions. Yeah, go.
So with the things that I said, also, I know you're tracking what you're doing in some way, shape, or form. Have a system to do that already, or are we going to need to purchase one as we fix it, or is it,
I can tell you it's underway.
Okay.
We have a framework. One of the things as part of the study was to build a GIS layer of all the impervious area within the city. So we have that data in GIS, so it becomes a maintenance issue. But on the work order history, we have that. We have a rough condition assessment, of needs. But yes, we have the framework to build on.
Okay, great, thank you.
So the last question that I would ask the committee to think about, maybe not necessarily answer right now, but when we say level of service associated with our stormwater responses, on our stormwater maintenance, what does that mean to you? And if there's a way that we can help describe that a little bit better as to what we mean by what we say, that just that way it's very clear. Because with anything, with all of these maintenance activities, there's varying degrees of things that you can do, varying levels of things that you can do. And, a lot of times, it takes a lot of time to go from, I'll say, our current state to, I'll say, a world-class state, kind of a leader in that. This is an area that we know that we've got a lot of room for improvement. But if we know what the level of service targets are, what the expectations are, that really helps set a clear picture of what it is that we're trying to accomplish.
Would you be able to, give us other cities to compare what they're doing?
Yes, we can look at what other cities are doing. And to Mr. Elam's point on level of service, don't worry about trying to put it in technical terms or jogging. Just describe what you think. Draw a picture. Hey, this would I think it would come more through just dialogue back and forth instead of trying to define it, so to speak.
Yeah. So think about it. So an example that I would have is we want to make sure that our pipes never overtop. For example, that's one thing that might not be realistic, but that's a discussion point to continue to talk about. I'll throw another one out that's a hot topic: private stream banks, private stream corridors. What do we think that the role of the city in those should be? That's a big question, huge question. We said we have 12 miles of city-owned streams right now, and Michael and I were talking. We don't know how many private miles of stream there are right now. We're going to try to look that up, but we know that it is probably 10 times that amount that are private. So those are different things. So as we look through the balance of all of this, just dialogue like that in our further conversation. And maybe I think that is one of our next steps, is to have a conversation with the committee specifically about level of service, and maybe in a work session type format.
Is there any comparison to what would it look like to outsource this work versus being city employees doing this work? I mean, I think you would, not to go in the weeds, and we can have this when we want to talk about our level of service. Is it 10 city employees standing around a hole in the ground and we're all going to hear about it, you're going to hear about it, or, hey, that's our subcontractor, we'll go out and talk to them? From a level of service perspective. I mean, but if it's more cost effective, we have to understand, hey, what's the most cost effective way to do it, and what are our expectations, and we can go to that.
I think that's definitely a fair question, is, where's the breaking point versus doing it ourselves versus contracting it out. And a lot of that does depend on, it'll depend on the scale of the challenge at the time and what that looks like. Because, I mean, that's no different than what we do today. Today, we handle some things in-house that make sense for us to handle the repairs in-house. But our capital projects, our big capital projects, we're contracting that out. We're contracting the design out, and we're managing those projects. So there's a balance to all of that. But absolutely, it's something to look at.
Yeah, Councilmember Funk, I think it's very similar to how we do pavement, water, sewer, and not for necessarily a cost benefit, but sometimes we just don't have the expertise or the capacity to do some of the smaller projects that we would normally do with our own folks, and maintenance and inspections and that kind of thing, which is always going to be more cost effective when we do it in-house versus the profit you add on to a company that's trying to make their business run. But I think it's always a hybrid of both. You're going to have some stuff that we do, preventative maintenance, reactive maintenance, that urgent stuff, we're ready to go, but then it starts to get a little larger. And we're like, oh, we want to keep our guys out there still inspecting and cleaning and doing those things. We'll use an on-call contract, or we'll go bid a contract and have them do it, just like we do on all those other maintenance programs that we have for our other assets.
Level of service, I think we need to, we already do, but that, we're like at a level 1 service, which is what do we want to be at, what do we want to try to get to with I think helping us in my mind, I would like for us to be able to do whatever level that takes to where we can do that.
Thank you. That takes us to Roundtable. Roundtable?
I don't, but as we move on, I just want to summarize kind of this feedback loop on some of the questions, adding to the questions we had, and I think a good place for us to start is on all this conversation of level service. But, we heard what level service do we want, compare our level service to what are other cities doing. What do we get for the cost recommendation that you saw in the presentation, and kind of equate that to a level of service? What do we specifically get in level of service? So again, answering those questions, I heard what a ballot might look like, review our funding options, staff recommendation for what the funding proposal is, any alternatives. Can we get some sort of assessment of incremental step to where we want to be in the future? Maybe this is only a part of the solution. And then how do we maintain the utility and its fee structure and the condition of our assets moving forward? What does implementation look like? All of those were really good questions, but I think we can really dive in on the level of service part. We'll keep track of all the other questions as we start to move forward. And once we know for sure, we got clarity on that level of service that we want, I think it will make the discussion on some of the funding a lot more beneficial, a lot more productive, as opposed to us chasing funding scenarios for the wrong level of service. So I think that's probably our next work session, is really talk about level of service and clarifying what that is.
Sounds good. All right, and nothing else?
I don't have anything else for Roundtable. Thank you.
Yes, the meeting is adjourned at 6:58. Thank you.